they're getting wild for me. And all the pretty chicks all wanna smile at me. These rap cats, man, they all got this style for me.
Rightio, welcome back to the East Coast Experience. Today, I have Caitlin James from SMP Australia. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Caitlin.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Caitlin, how many years have you been in the SMP industry?
Cool. So this year it is coming into my 10th year, so currently 9 years. And we've seen so much change in that time. So I'm hoping to chat about that with you today.
Wow, 9 years. That's amazing. I want to say as well, first of all, congratulations for everything that you've achieved. And I also, myself, I want to say thank you, because I think coming into SMP, having someone achieve what you've achieved is super inspiring. And when you see someone do it, you realize that that's possible as well. Do you ever, this is a question that I personally want to ask, is do you ever sit back and just pinch yourself for you currently have 4 studios, you've been here for 9 years and you're still here? Do you ever sit back and, yeah?
I don't know. I think I just keep loving the challenges. So I never feel like I'm there. I always feel like I've always got my own goals that I want to set, to help our industry here in Australia. So, sometimes I do forget to sit back and look at how much we really have achieved in that time.
Yeah. That was something that I wanted to ask, because, I guess for myself, it's I'm viewing you as the end goal. Do you know what I mean? For, years to come for myself, but you being there, and it is hard sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes we don't sit back and really think about how far we have come.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Like, I think everyone, especially in a day where we're all comparing, yourself to other people, subconsciously, you may not intend to compare yourself to other people, but, we just naturally do. And sometimes you do need to take that moment to sit back and realize like how much you personally have achieved.
Yeah. And the reason I say, congratulations, and I also say thank you, is I think that without even knowing it, you just chipping away at it for these past 9 years, it does inspire other artists. And because we now have like a roadmap to follow, because there is one there. And I guess you're sort of paving the way. And when you started 9 years ago, did you have this vision in mind? Is this something that like Caitlin sat down and thought, hey, this is what I want to build? Because I guess it wasn't really there 9 years ago.
Yeah. So, I didn't sit down and have an end goal of, I want to open, multiple locations. I want to have a team. I didn't think of that at all. I think that all came very naturally from other artists that were feeling like I was feeling. And 9 years ago, and when my other artists stepped into our company, they were all having the same struggles as I had. And I'm a person that naturally wants to help people. That's purely, my sole purpose, I think, is, helping people with SMP or helping people with business. And so together I thought, right, well, Claudia was the first one in Melbourne to come on board with me. I was really struggling to keep up with the demand between Adelaide and Melbourne, and her coming on board was a bit of a relief, and she was needing more work. And so it just worked. And then that kind of happened again when we brought on, Maria and Anita, in Sydney and Brisbane, and then Ari. We all just wanted to help each other. And so the business just grew quite naturally. And I think that's why it's worked, because our goals were all the same.
That sounds like, sounds like such a beautiful process. And so 9 years ago, when you did start, what was SMP looking like back then? Were you were you one of the first artists here in Australia? Because
no, I wasn't the first, but I mean, I originally saw Scalp Micropigmentation at a hair transplant conference that I was at in Alaska through the International Society of Hair Restoration. Yeah, so
Alaska.
So I went to, as many people know, that my previous work role was a hair transplant assistant. I worked with Dr. Mario Mazzola here in Adelaide. So I did hair transplant assisting for 10 years. and dovetailed a bit of that time with scalp micropigmentation. And I first saw SMP in its infancy stages by Dr. Jay Park. He had a client walking around in this conference in Alaska who had full scalp alopecia, and he had managed to create scalp micropigmentation for this client or this patient of his, where hair transplant is not an option. And so I first saw it over there, and then skip forward to 2014, 15. That's when my surgeon said to me, look, I'm thinking of retiring, which he still hasn't. But he said, is there anything else you want to learn how to do? And so he was a great mentor for me, even though he wasn't an SMP mentor, he was a hair transplant mentor. A lot of that worked together really well, and it set me some really good goals of my own. He sort of showed me how you can get involved in your own industry and start to be a pioneer of your own, as he was a pioneer. And that was really important to me. I certainly wasn't the first in Australia. There wasn't that many companies around. Kate Dawes was over in Perth doing some scalp micropigmentation over there. There was Vinci Clinic in Melbourne and Sydney, Shadow Clinic in, I think, Sydney, Melbourne, or maybe Sydney at that stage. And there wasn't a lot of training options. So there certainly wasn't many providers here, and certainly not many good training options.
Yeah, wow. So you were in Alaska and you saw SMP. That is
that was
a wild story. Wow.
Anyone else like traveling all on my own for the very first time? I cannot tell you how nervous and stressed, my anxiety was through the roof. I'm not a very extroverted person, so to travel all that way on my own, that was very scary for me, but it was a very good experience to get me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, so you were there, and that was a conference based around hair transplants, is that right?
Correct, yeah. So the International Society of Hair Restoration, ishrs.org, is a international organisation for hair transplant surgeons and assistants that my doctor was a part of.
Okay, so you're a transplant assistant. So does that mean that you're actually in there and you get to see the transplants happening, and like you're passing the tools to the surgeon? Is that right?
Correct. And there's different parts to the hair transplant team, and I moved from, first of all, learning how to cut and trim grafts, through to slithering the pieces when we used to have FUT procedures, through to helping the doctor extract the grafts with the FUE, and then last of all, learning how to plant the little hairs during the surgery. So the doctor would sit on one side of the patient and I would sit on the other side.
So you're doing that, and then you see SMP. What are your like first thoughts? I know this is a long time ago, but like, do you think? Because I know my first thoughts when I saw SMP. But did you think, wow, this is weird, or wow, this is beautiful, or did you think, oh, this is a great alternative, maybe, or this is going to be nothing at all?
I think I thought, wow, this is something I could do from like managing a client from start to finish. Obviously, with the transplant work, you basically rock up for the day, you work in theatre for the day, and then you go home, but you don't really have any control with that client, as in terms of like the hairline design, or, you are limited by either the client's budget with how many grafts they're moving, or you might be limited by their donor area as to how many grafts you can move for them. With this, it's limitless. We can put in what we need to put in. We give our client, their overall quote, but we can make the result as full or as dark, or camouflage the scarring for them without any limitations to the donor area or their budget, which I love. And I love being able to manage that client myself from start to finish.
Question about transplants. There isn't too much that they can do with a hairline design with a transplant, because I like a lot of them that I see seem quite straight. Is that because there's not as much leniency to be able to break up that hairline? Would that be fair to say?
I think it is down to the surgeon, because hairline design is very much a whole subject on its own that they are taught, and it's up to the creativity of that surgeon how they place single grafts versus grafts that contain 2 hairs versus grafts that contain 3 hairs. So, how much they feather off that result, that's up to the design of the surgeon, and understanding what the client wants. But also it can be limited by what grafts are supplied as well, by what that client has in the donor area.
So the transplant industry itself, that would have changed a lot over 9 years too. Because
Oh,
yeah, like so back then when you were you looking at when you were assistant, was it the scarring like a smiley face at the back, and now it's more of the plugs almost?
yeah. So the FUT is that strip.
It's a strip. Yep.
I first was an assistant for many years, helping the doctor close, the pieces of tissue at the back there, forming that really nice thin scar in most cases. But then about 2012 was where the doctor made a very big decision on to change over. No more FUT. Gold standard is FUE. There are some cases, of course, where FUT is still the better option for the client, but for most part, 90% of our work was then all FUE because the doctor wanted to stay at the forefront of the gold standard of hair transplant here in Australia.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on transplants even now? Like, I know that a lot of SMP artists, and I see sometimes on YouTube that it sometimes becomes a versus, like a transplant versus SMP. Whereas me personally, I think one complements the other. And I also think, a lot of the time SMP's a shaved head, and a lot of the time with transplants, guys trying to keep their hair. But, I think personally that the two go together. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. And this is really interesting. This was back in the first conference for scalp micropigmentation in 2017. This was my topic. I spoke
Cool.
at Team Micro in Leeds in the UK about this very topic, because at this stage, you were right, it was very sort of one against the other. And my whole talk was about how much we can complement each other, because I feel like one really does need the other. You might create the bulk of the treatment with hair transplant, but SMP is always the icing on the cake. So it's very much that they both should be working together. Hair transplant really needs to be given to those that are truly a good candidate, though. Not everybody is a good candidate.
Yes.
So knowing where the patient sits in terms of their long-term hair loss and what medications they're prepared to stay on or not stay on. I feel like far too many people are stepping into hair transplant thinking it's the best option, where it's very individual.
And you said that before, that one of your frustrations with the transplant was not being able to see the end result with the client and how they looked after it. And this is something that you might see on my social media sometime, and I do joke about it, but I'm just trying to make light of a harsh situation of being bald, is that a lot of the time when I see people coming in with scarring that needs tattooed in with SMP and blended in, it's not that it's a bad transplant. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But it's that they don't have enough hairs for the transplant. And did you see this in the transplant industry, where there's points where you would have to say to a client, "Hey, look, you don't have enough hair for this transplant."
The surgeon would, Sorry.
And did you see, I guess, some surgeons not having that conversation, and some surgeons, because I guess that's a moral thing, right? Because they don't. It's a good customer care to have that conversation, but I guess they don't need to. There's not some law holding them to do that.
Yeah, correct. So it is very much down to, unfortunately, transplant is a elective procedure. It's not a medical procedure. It's an elective procedure. So at the end of the day, the hair transplant clinics are a salesy, industry. They all need to survive. And maybe some cases, are going ahead that perhaps shouldn't be. But I feel like morally of the doctors, they should be giving the best advice possible, looking into the future of that client, and making sure that they're doing everything they can to protect the natural hair that's in the area, be that medication to slow down, further hair loss. And if the client's not prepared to be on that, then they really do need to consider, if this procedure is the right option for them. because I do see a lot of people going through hair transplants that perhaps are not the best candidates because they are on their way to a Norwood 7 and not prepared to take on medications to stop further loss.
Yeah. And I'm guessing transplants are continuing to evolve. I was even speaking to a friend this morning and he went and got one done. And they're actually able to take hair from the beard and and chest hair as well now, so that there's not as much scarring at the back of the head.
Yeah. I mean, facial hair would be the number one choice after scalp hair because it is a thicker, more active hair. It grows for a longer period of time before they would choose body hair. Body hair tends to grow for 3 months and then go into a resting phase of up to 3 years. So it's a very lazy hair. You don't get bang for buck. Whereas the facial hair, it's very active. It's a thicker, more wiry hair. Given time, it can take on the characteristics of the surrounding hair in the area, so it can soften over time. But we have seen some amazing results for some of our clients who've gone over to India at Eugenics Clinic, who specialize in Norwood 7 cases where they do use body hair and facial hair, and we have seen some absolutely incredible results from them.
Wow. I think too, for yourself, when a client steps into your studio, I'm just almost feeling like how they would feel talking to you, and the wealth of information that you have must be so helpful for them, not just with SMP, but with transplants as well. And this is something that I try and do is I try and just really involve myself in all hair loss industries, everything to do around it, because when I don't want to not have an answer in the studio here. And if I don't, I want to find that answer, not just make up, no, transplants are crap, SMP's it. And
Absolutely. I think you're doing the best thing by your client is if you know, I mean, you don't have to be an expert in all areas, but if you know that SMP is probably not their best option right now, at least head them in the right direction. Because the worst thing you can do is talk someone in or persuade someone into having SMP if they're not truly ready. Because then you're only going to end up with an unhappy client that's still on their search to get the result that they were actually wanting.
Yeah, and I think this is where sales sometimes can get a really bad name. And whenever I have a conversation with, it's funny for me to say this because I'm the beginner in comparison to you, but I have beginners messaging me, and it's so awesome that I can help them as well. And the biggest thing that they're struggling with is doing the calls and calling the client. And it's like, oh, I'm not salesy, I don't want to push them into it. But the thing is like just talking to you right now, the wealth of knowledge that you have around hair loss, that is sales. You're there helping the person into their decision. And I think sometimes we get this notion that sales is a bad thing. But I believe, and this is what I say to new people asking me this question, is I believe with sales is that if you view it as you're helping the client into their decision, you're not pushing the client into their decision.
And I always think of a consultation, it's an opportunity to educate. So, that's where I think I excel in this area is, I do have a wealth of knowledge in lots of different areas. And my goal at the consultation is to help educate, let the person sit with that information, and then they can go in the right direction as to what's best for them.
Yeah. All right, let's go back. So let's go back 9 years ago. Something that you said is that you didn't really set goals, is that this happened extremely organically. And it's something that it sparked up a thought when you said that, is goal setting for me is huge. Like, and I think when someone's starting out, sometimes I hear like a new student say, before they've even actually started training, is that, well, I'm going to own the biggest training studio and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this and do this. And I think sometimes maybe the goal setting in that instance makes them overwhelmed. And whereas when I'm talking to you, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that you are still oozing with passion when you talk about this and you're still excited. And when I said, have you sat around and looked at what you've done? You're like, I'm just ready. I'm just excited for the next challenge, right?
Yeah.
So I guess if you're a beginner looking at this, is look at Caitlin and just enjoy it. That's what I ask is like, do you enjoy it? Like, does your treatment keep you up at night? And you want to do everything to make the client's process just the best thing ever. And
Yeah.
yeah, so when 9 years ago and you started, and I didn't ask a question there, but 9 years ago, is that how it sort of unraveled for you? Is that this little obsession sort of kicked in?
Yeah, and obsession is a good word. Like, I think I get really, I mean, a lot of us are a little bit on the OCD side. I get a little bit controlling, but I mean, perfection is also another trait that a lot of us have. Everyone wants to like perfect treatments based on what our client wants. But I also look at my business as a baby, and like I want it to be perfect as well. So traits, that I have, and not just in my SMP treatments, but also in my business. I want the experience of our clients to be perfect. And you're right, like you can't start, well, you can start a business with a goal in mind of I want to open a certain amount of clinics, but I think you really need to step back and actually really love this. And if you love it, then you will be successful.
Most definitely, and yeah, that's the first thing is loving it, and also what I'd say too. And you're going to have heaps more knowledge in this area than me too, but I guess managing people is a whole different other skill outside of SMP. And I don't know, I've never been inside your business, but I've heard how your students talk about you, and I've seen how you guys hang out, and it looks like the most fun, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
How was that transition from you're loving SMP, you're passionate about it, and then into managing people? How did you find that transition?
Yeah, I think that was a skill of mine that I had brought with me from transplanting. I think, and before that, I don't know if you're aware, but I was a beauty therapist before the transplant work.
Okay.
So I've always loved working with people and making people feel good about themselves. So managing people and managing their experience and managing their treatments and their aftercare and long term, that's all very natural to me.
Yeah. It seems like you do have that caring sort of side, and you've almost created an entire business around that.
Yeah, for sure. You've always got to treat people the way you want to be treated. And if you do that, you'll always come out a winner.
Yeah. So, all right. So 9 years ago, you would have signed up for a course to do SMP? Yeah.
Yeah. So the
How was that?
first one, I was very naive. I found a place in Australia that offered it. And I thought that was it. I'd heard someone had gone there. I went across to, had to travel. I had to pay for my client, who was my model, to go with me. It was pretty expensive, like
Do you
for what
remember
it
how much?
was. I reckon I paid around 4,000 Australian to do a 2-day course. We worked on 2 models, so one she supplied and one was my own. And um, it was not what I thought. The manual, every now and again, I was skipping through and I saw the words eyebrow. So she had really just moved her eyebrow manual into an SMP manual. And the techniques were really more permanent makeup. Needless to say, the results were not good. And I was really nervous, and my husband was really nervous for me to do any more training because we'd already just outlaid $4,000. And so, yeah,
Your
I was
confidence
really,
was a little bit low at that point, and
oh,
thinking,
100%.
yeah,
I was really almost a bit angry because, what I had been taught, like even the teachers' work, when I saw that healed on my client, even the teachers' work was horrible. And I was really cross that I had been almost deceived. And the advice was, you just have to keep practicing. And I said, well, if your work's not good, what hope, do I have with this technique that you've given me? And I even contacted the pigment manufacturer about the product that she had supplied and encouraged me to purchase. And the manufacturer said, no, this is not designed for scalp micropigmentation. So I asked for a refund on my training. And as far as I got was a $45 refund for the pigment.
Oh, really?
So
So
that
she
was,
stuck it to you there.
yeah. So it was
Wow.
pretty disappointing. Like it's
Wow.
not a good start to the industry, and it sort of opened my eyes a lot as to how many not very ethical people are in this industry.
Yeah. Um, so where did you go from there? So I know the feeling. And I think this is a thought that I had the other day. I almost think, and tell me your thoughts on this, that that person doing that unethical training almost ignited and sparked something in you to go and want to do it and do it well. Just almost not
Yeah.
in spite, but almost like it's like someone needs help. Like those models that are there, someone needs to help them. Someone needs to be able to repair the bad work, and someone needs to be able to do a good job.
Yeah. Angry was a good word. I was really cross that I had spent that money, and that she had received that money out of me, because she didn't deserve that. Um, and so I did my research, and the only place I could find at this point that long ago without buying a franchise, I didn't want to buy a franchise. I wanted to start my own company. Without buying a franchise, I had to travel. The only place I could find was a place in Phoenix, Arizona. So that's where I went.
No
And
way.
yeah, so again, got my suitcase and off I went, traveled across the world on my own. And I hated every minute of traveling on my own, because I just don't do that. I'm like,
So
who am I?
you've been to Alaska and Phoenix before you've even started your business at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And that was an awesome week. So I spent a week over there.
Yep.
I then traveled on to Seattle to spend some more time with another SMP artist in Seattle, Pam Neighbours, who's a dear friend of mine. And I started making these connections. So that was a company called Scalp Aesthetics back in the day, which is now known as Scalper. It's changed a lot in that time. Back in the early days, you had to travel there to do the training. They didn't offer online training. And so you had to go there and physically do the work with Bryce Cleveland and Joe Taylor, who now owns Scalp Logic. He set me up with some really good foundations, which I still use today. The products obviously have changed, the machines have changed, needles have changed in that time, but the foundation training that I received from them was really quite good.
And what was the needles and the machines like back then, and the inks? Was it what was the difference from then till now?
Yeah, so we were using tattoo machines. So
Oh, like
like a
coil,
proper,
not coil.
not a coil, but like a digital version of that. So
Yes. Yep.
um, it was a tattoo machine. It was heavy. Used to make my fingers go numb by the end of 4 or 5 hours of tattooing.
Oh no.
We were using single needles as well, which was a big difference. So we're using a 1201 or a 1401.
Yep.
And the pigments was a pigment that basically had 9 color tones created. So for me, when I reflect on that, there's a lot of scope for error because only 9 colors, there's a big jump between them, whereas now we dilute our colors out 1 to 30. So it's only like a third of the color range. If you think of 9 shades versus 30 shades, there's a lot of room for error when you're jumping down in the color tones.
So
Potentially going to
explain
that.
that. So the color tones is it just was it just carbon black, and you mean that you couldn't dilute it as much?
Yeah, you just dilute it. So they made it in a way where we actually didn't really know, first of all, what it was. So it was all super secretive at that time. We didn't know it was carbon black. We didn't know what brand it was because Scalper labeled it as their own. And the way that they mixed it was they used to label the bottles SCAL and PA, so scalp. And you started off with 5 drops of the middle one, and then you either diluted it 1, 2, or 3, the lighter color, or 1, 2, 3, the darker color. So it's actually super confusing. It's much more confusing than just using 1 drop of pigment and then diluting it out by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through to 30. So I feel like there was an element of confusion. So we couldn't just go out on our own. We had to buy
Yeah.
the scalp kit. And these scalper kits cost me $750 per client.
Wait,
So
hold on a minute. So to do the treatment for the client costs you
mhm.
$750 in ink and needles.
Yeah. So in the kit, it had everything we needed to complete one client. It had 3 little tiny bottles of pigment. It had 3 needles. It had 3 grips for your tattoo machine, so that you couldn't do more than one person with this box. And that's how they made their money. It was a very good business idea because they couldn't keep track of commissions as such. So this was their way of earning a little bit out of everybody's treatment. So it was
It's so
pretty smart.
short-sighted though, isn't it? It's smart,
Yeah,
definitely on a business sense, but I think that is one of the big problems that the SMP faces is that when people only view it from a business point of view, not like you've spoken about just now on like what's the best thing for the client or what's the best thing for your
yeah,
student.
yeah, yeah, totally. So it was a bit of an eye opener as well. I knew I could do better, and I could. There was some gaps in their training, and so I sat with that knowledge for about 2 years before I then went over to the UK. And at that point, again, I had researched as much as I could about who was creating the results that my clients were asking for. And the American style of SMP is typically harder, straighter, not as creative hairlines, a lot more bolder. And in Australia, I just find, especially in SA down in Adelaide, the guys just wanted it to be as discreet and more of an enhancement, but not a real designer look as such, which is what the Americans on a whole tended to be. So I did my research again to find someone that I really loved their treatments and loved their results. I loved Paul Clark's work, so I sort of followed him for a long time before going over to the UK and then doing some updated training with him there.
So did you have the little scalper kit right up until that point?
Yeah. So I had to keep purchasing with every client
Oh my
the scalp
God.
kit. Yeah.
How long did you do that for? Like how are we talking months or?
I think in the end they started dropping their prices down, and they made it more affordable for the clients. And as people within that company started to give out a little bit of extra information, we started to know, right, what is a needle code? I can actually buy these needles myself. Like, we weren't taught anything about needle codes or, gauges of the needle. So you didn't actually know what you were using. You were given the needle, great, it works well. Then I think people started talking in the forums a little bit that had just started. Taryn Quintrini, a good friend of mine, again from Phoenix, she had started a online forum about scalp micropigmentation
Yeah, I've seen
with
that
Stephen
stuff.
Bretzia. Yeah, and we started talking in the forums about what we were using. And I think as social media and these forums started getting us all together, we started to work out what it was that we were using.
Mm. And so those forums, that was like a Facebook type group type of thing?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
Facebook group.
nice. Just like they
Yeah.
have now. Yeah, I agree. I agree with the SMP style over in America as well. I think that the difference is, and I think SMP is growing super fast in America, one, because of the population, but I also think personality types, like Americans are a bit more loud and with that, once they get their hairline, they show it off and they're very enthusiastic. And whereas Australian hairlines, it's more of the natural side, more of keeping it private, more of not wanting anyone to notice. Oh, look, I want to keep on going with your story, but I've just jotted this down, is that if any new artists are watching this or are looking to start SMP, their road travel is going to be so much easier than what you have just explained. I'm like, I can't believe I complained about what I was going through to try and become an SMP artist. Because that is, you also as well, you've got to have a level of, I don't know if the word's discipline, but unwavering, just no quit in you. You kept going. Because you could have got disheartened after that first course. You could have got disheartened after they're charging you 750, because it would have been very hard to make money at that point. Was this your full-time income when that was happening?
No, so I kept doing my hair transplant work alongside my SMP for 4 years. So a lot of people think, and even today they think, right, if I do this training, I can quit my job, I can do SMP full time. You can't, like, until you start to get a nice solid base of a clientele that has good word of mouth. Like, we are very honest to our students that come through that it can take a really long time to actually be able to drop the second income stream
I
to
love that.
live off SMP. Yeah. So, I mean, it's certainly, Australia doesn't have the awareness still to have enough SMP artists warranting full-time work. It's definitely, like myself, I had to keep dovetailing for 4 years doing 2 jobs.
Yeah. And it's the thing is that I think SMP itself creates a false reality, because anywhere you go, you're an apprentice for 3 to 4 years. But
And
sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, like, apprentice is such a good word, because so many people are quick to call themselves a specialist or, and a master. You know, you've done one course for 3 days and you're calling yourself a master SMP artist. And it's, a real shame that people feel like they have to skip ahead and, like, just be honest and, call yourself an apprentice if that's what you are. There's no shame in that. It shows you doing the hard yards to get there.
Yeah, for sure. I think too as well, sometimes it can be who you're talking to as well. Sometimes you can get fed bullshit and you don't know anything different. And what I love is what you just said, is that you're honest with your students. And this is something me and you had a conversation probably 2 years ago, and you might not remember, but we were at a master's class for Tony, and I was asking you so many questions because I was just so interested, because I'd watched your work, seen, and I spoke to you about training, and you said wait and do it, at the 3-year mark or the 4-year mark. You don't know how many different, you haven't experienced enough skin, enough heads, and I did. I pulled back my marketing on anything training related. But because I almost had this false perception in my mind, I was a big fish, small pond. I was in an extremely bad training environment where all the work was terrible, and mine was, I put in more effort.
Way better.
Yeah, and I put in more effort. So I was like, why? And then on my day-to-day there was basically helping students, training them. And I'm like, and I'm not getting paid to do this.
Yeah. I was just going to say, exactly right. Like, when you're creating beautiful work and you're seeing your trainer who's not as creative, or, people around you not creating the work that you are, why should they receive the training money? And I guess that's how I felt with my very first trainer. Like, I was really angry that she had made that money from me where I don't feel it was deserving.
No, not at all. Yeah, frustration was definitely there for me as well. And I guess also because I wasn't earning any money off of SMP. And the other part is that I got told when I started training that I was going to earn a 6-figure income, within, and the timeline was like within a year. And it actually said on my training manual, 250K, that had that number in money, like with a dollar sign in front of it. And I'm thinking, all right, well, I'll just go, I'll go buy a sports car now. But I've done a whole podcast on business side of SMP and my struggles within that business. That 250K is like so far into the future that, and almost, I would say, almost unattainable with an Australian audience, because we don't have that vast, dense population like America. And but this is the thing, is that you had that uncomfortable conversation with me, and although it's the harsh truth, and I needed to hear it, but I think that more people who are good at SMP need to keep having these conversations, because it doesn't feel great, obviously, but the more that we have these conversations, and the more that it's focused on quality, focused on being an artist. And that was one conversation that really sits in my mind to me becoming full-time. Another one was I had with my little sister, who is she's a tattoo artist, an extremely successful tattoo artist. She's an amazing artist. She's been doing it for 9 years, roughly the same time we've done SMP. And I remember I was struggling. I was about a year in. And she goes, you know that I did 4 years without making any money to become a tattoo artist. She goes, how long have you done this for? I'm like, 12 months. She goes, treat it like you're an apprentice. She's like, don't expect any money out of this. And when I changed that mindset, it was much more enjoyable as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like the marketing strategy of the second company, Scalp Aesthetics, that I went to, it was very much like that, earn like $1 million lifestyle, doing scalp micropigmentation. And I feel like it really grabbed a whole lot of people that maybe SMP wasn't going to be passionate for them. They were just looking at the dollar signs. But I feel like over time, the people who were passionate have really stayed, and the people that were there for the money have, lost interest. They realized it was unattainable. But it's funny that that same kind of marketing strategy was used for yourself as well, because it is very unrealistic to kind of earn that money, especially in Australia, where you said we're not as densely populated, especially where you are on the Gold Coast. You have the most amount of SMP artists anywhere in a small area. And so, if people are not searching for the best services or creativity or work or outcomes, they're searching because of cost. And if there's that many people in a concentrated area, everyone is just discounting. And so you can never really earn the money that was promised when everybody's doing treatments for next to nothing.
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, we have 500,000 people here on the Gold Coast, and I think Melbourne has 6 million. I could be wrong with those numbers, but we have more SMP artists here on the Gold Coast than there is in Melbourne, I think, or the same amount. So to put that into perspective, when you're a student trying to start, and another thing as well, if you're living in Toowoomba, if you're living in Byron Bay, if you're living out in one of these suburbs where there's even less people, it's going to take longer to build. It's not impossible, but that is a huge determining factor of what your business is going to turn into. Because if you don't have an audience, you don't have a business. And something that I did too. So I actually, what I did was I'm not advertising for any students or anything like that, but I just put it on my website just to see like if I'd get some hits and stuff. But I went in it with a mentality of like keeping my morals in check the whole time. And I haven't had a single student come through, because every time they inquire, I have an hour-long conversation with them, and I go into depth about everything, and I'm just truthful. Like they asked me like how long it took me to earn a wage. It's like 3 years. it's like how long does it take to get like they're like after the 5 days am I going to be able to jump into my own business? Like, no, this is going to take you 12 months to get like just average out.
Yeah.
And it's just like any other craft. I don't know why we don't view it this way, but it's hard. It's hard to get good at when you start. You're going to suck, but you got to suck without ruining people's heads. And I think that's a craft in itself. And you are obviously a very experienced trainer. How do you find that process? And do you find, because for me, I don't know, I already don't sleep with the treatment, worried what the treatment's going to turn out like now. But having students out there, obviously you do have some great students that I've met and are so fond of you and are killing it. First of all, how do you manage that, the quality within the students? And then how does it feel to have students doing so well?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. In my trainings, I've always asked for feedback. We give feedback forms, and with every training that we do, I try and make it better than the previous by taking on board what it is that students feel like they either didn't have enough help with, or the things that they really loved. I made sure that we kept that in the program. So the program changes all the time. One thing that kept sort of popping up is the amount that students felt skin changes between models. And so we actually will provide a number of different models, and we switch between those models during the training session. So by the time a student has left, they've been able to work on 6 different skins, because the skin is something that changes so much between every client. And if you work on one model and then, you work on them and do a perfect treatment while you're in there with your trainer, but then you go to start your own business and your first person has a completely different skin, and you're finding it really hard to implant the pigment, or it's not staying, or it's really light, or it came back really dark. Those are the sorts of areas that we try to navigate in the training, so that you get used to, different skins. And when you work so closely, going from one to another, you can really feel the differences. And so I feel like just trying to give the students enough confidence with enough experience in our training program, so that when they do go out on their own, it's not so scary. And if they feel like, oh, okay, this skin, it's a bit harder to implant, I know how to tackle that. I know how to, change my machine a little bit, or my angle a little bit. We try and give them the tools to use, so that when they're out on their own, they have, some really good confidence getting started. The design is probably the biggest thing that the students struggle with initially, is the hairline design. And that's something that just comes with experience and practice.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff it is repetition. What I want to ask you, with how many heads you've seen and how much time you've spent in the industry, is there ever a time that you get some skin into your studio that you just frustrates you, or it's something new that you've seen?
I had something twice in this last year, which is something brand new, which I haven't put anything up online about just yet, because again, I'm all about if I'm going to show something, I want to show the long-term implications of that. This year we had 2 guys come through that had really bad sun damage, and it had actually scarred the top of their scalp, that they'd lost skin tone in that area. So when you looked at the top of their scalp, it had lots of pigmentation, but it also had lots of skin tone that was missing. And this is something that was new and exciting for me this year, because I got to do some skin tone camouflage first, before then applying the scalp micropigmentation on top. And you'll see the results of that. They're coming up to almost 9 and 12 months old now. So you'll see the long-term results of that come out in my socials later on this year, to show how we actually corrected the skin tone first, prepared the base to give them really beautiful scalp micropigmentation. Just
ask, what do you mean by skin tone camouflage? Is that something separate to SMP itself? So there's that,
yes,
like the scar camouflage I've seen. It's more of it's another cosmetic treatment itself, isn't it? Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So they had lack of skin tone. It was all white and motley. And if I had just gone in with scalp micropigmentation, I'm basically tattooing into a very pale translucent skin. So my SMP would not complement evenly everywhere. I would almost get touches of blue if I wasn't careful in those really pale areas. So correcting it with skin tone first, with like skin tone camouflage treatments, and then going through the SMP on top gave a really even effect that you'll see the results of that later on this year.
Wow, that's amazing. So
there's always new things.
Yeah, and that's you. This is you just challenging like you said at the very beginning of the podcast, you love challenging yourself. You could have just done that SMP treatment and then just kept on moving. But instead, you're always getting better. You're always pushing yourself, and you're thinking about the client in that instance. And how can I make this result the best for this client?
Yeah, absolutely. Aiming for perfection. So if I knew if I'd just gone in with SMP, I'd still have unevenness to the area. And I just wanted to make it as seamless and smooth as possible. So thinking outside the square and applying skin tone first before we went through with the SMP, and it worked a treat.
Yeah, yeah. So that's so that was the first. Was there any other skins that you found frustrating or that you still find frustrating now?
Only when I work on skin grafted skin. So there was a client that I worked on this year where he had from a traumatic experience. He was a police officer who was shot in the face, and so he had a big skin graft taken from his thigh and placed to his cheek area. So essentially, you're actually doing scalp micropigmentation on thigh tissue,
Yeah.
not facial tissue. So we were doing facial micropigmentation. That was difficult because I haven't treated a thigh before. I've treated collarbone grafting before, which acts quite similar to facial tissue. So I guess it's just the unknown, and that's where your test patching is perfect.
Yeah.
So with those sorts of skins, test patching, we just put in a number of different tones and then we get them to come back 1 week later. We can check it. Then I have a bit more of a preview as to what I'm actually going to be doing. So if I'm ever unsure about something like that, we always do our test patching for allergies, plus giving me a preview as to what I'm actually going to pop in. And that's the best way, because I won't work on someone unless I'm confident I can create a beautiful result.
Wow, that's such an awesome process. It's also a process without ego there, because if you've got someone that's calling themselves a master artist, something like a test patch might be below them. And but I think that I had this the other day, is that I was like, I'm not sure. So I did 3 dots and I'm like, come back next week. Let's see how this heals. Heals all right. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm like, I'm not going to be too big for my boots. I'm going to think, how do I make the best treatment for this client? And how did you find tattooing thigh tissue? I actually have a client he hasn't come in yet, but he has skin graft a thigh on his head.
Yeah.
So how did you find that process?
It's so much thicker, and I think I was just working a lot slower. Like I work really slowly anyway when I'm doing facial micropigmentation. It's amazing to see the technique that I have versus what I see online of all this fast, jabby stuff with the face. The way I work is super slow. So like there's just completely different approaches to facial micropigmentation. And so I was working really quite slowly anyway, because that's how I work. But I feel like with thigh tissue, like you just need to turn your speed down, implant more color, because it is a very thick skin. But test patching, like you said, like it's not like I test patch all the time. Whenever I do consultation, I always have my tray ready to go, because I am assuming I'm going to be doing a test patch at every consultation. First of all, in case for allergy of the client, it's in my consent form that they have a test patch or they give a waiver. But test patching is really important, because why would you spend 4 or 5 hours if you're a beginner going through creating this result only for them to come back and you've been a little bit too cautious and your result is really light and you've wasted almost a whole session. So test patching, when I teach SMP, it's a super important part, and I have some really great diagrams of how we like to do our test patching, because it gives you a preview. Why would you not want a preview? So you can work really confidently in your first session. It just makes sense.
That's a huge nugget, and that's something that I have literally just started to implement, is the console that I set up on my machine. I set up everything, and then I do a test patch. And it's so crazy that, yeah, I think that it's common sense. It sounds like common sense, but it's something that you don't think about. But the reason that I did it is actually because I've come across skin that I think is going to be one way and then comes back healed almost the polar opposite. And I'm thinking to myself, how do I eliminate this? I'm constantly thinking, how do I eliminate how do I make the result the best result that it can be, and how do I eliminate any mistakes? And if you do the test patch, I think that you're solidifying how that skin's going to feel, and then you're ready for those for the sessions to come. I have another question: is there a point? So this is something, when I get a really good set of skin in, and the needle hits perfect, everything goes well. You have one of those days. When I have one of those days, I'm like, I'm a master. I'm the best. Yeah, I'm pro. But I think SMP can be a bit of a roller coaster, because if I get a week of bad, tough skin, I'm going, I need to quit. I suck. I'm terrible. And with how long you've been in the industry, like, have you dealt with these ups and downs? And do you still deal with those ups and downs?
I don't think I have those ups and downs anymore, but I can certainly relate, because certainly in the first year of SMP, it was just like, you go through those moments where you're like, I nailed it. It was so good. I did it in 3 sessions. And then the next one comes through and you're just like, what am I doing? Is my product changing, or is it me? What's my client done? So there is these really big ups and downs. But I guess in our business, we're really quite strict on the skin preparation and the skin aftercare. That's up to the client. But then we also have what we do in our clinic, to make every session as sort of how it should be, as perfect as it should be. But I usually just like to sit down and I'm like, okay, this is the skin we've got today. This is what I need to do. Away we go.
Yeah, you've built up sort of like a tough resilience towards that bad skin. It's hard, and I think at points it's like, I guess it's like anything you try in life. Like, it's you get to this point where you just got to take a deep breath, stay patient, and keep pushing. And the worst thing you can do, and you said it before, when you see those fast little dots everywhere, like, it looks awesome on Instagram. But I remember I was going to employ one of my friends, because I had this real busy spike at one point, and it never ended up happening. But he came in and we were doing some training, and as soon as he got on the practice mat, he started going really, really fast. I said, whoa, slow down.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh, because he started following some bigger artists. I said, yeah, you don't understand. That's 10 years time. And even then, still, that's that set of skin for that circumstance. That's not every single day. Every single day is slow, dot, wipe that dot, see if that dot looks good, and then on to the next one.
Yeah. I just don't see how you can create perfection when you're working so quickly, because your depths are going to vary whether you're experienced or not. Like, you can't get perfection when you work so jabby. And when you're using like a 4.2, like a really punchy, powerful machine with a long stroke, like, it's just going to run away from you. So, in our trainings, we really focus on just going nice and slowly and methodically, and the speed will come. But there's only so fast you can actually work, because if I was to go in and out the skin super quick and my machine's running really quick, I'm not implanting much color. Whereas if you're working, and this is funny because I actually heard someone say at one of these master trainings, and they were saying that they work really, really quickly, so they have to have their machine running really, really fast. And I'm thinking, well, that's actually the opposite. Like, if you're working really quickly, you actually need to turn your machine down. Otherwise, you're not going to implant much color, but unless that was your goal, not to implant much color. So it's really interesting to listen to people who haven't been in the industry that long about certain techniques and how they, are coming up with their own little style. But, you do have to, you can only work so fast. Otherwise, you're just not going to get good color retention.
100%. But the thing is, Caitlin, is that we want to look cool.
You look cool anyway. You don't need to ruin someone's head.
Yeah, I think it sells. And I think that's where sort of getting a common theme to this chat is that when it sells and when it's all business related and it's not thinking about the end result for the client and the care for the client, it doesn't work. And yeah, you get a flashy car and you pull up in your super fast technique and it's like, what? Sign me up. I want the fast car and I want to look cool too. But that's not what gets you the result. It's slow.
Yeah.
You take your time, and there is something true. This is probably something that I would say is that if someone is starting out, if it's that feeling when you get a really good impression, if you get like a little excited feeling when you get that, like that, when you hit the skin and you nail it. If you get that excited feeling when then that's a good sign that the SMP might be for you, I think.
Yeah. I love that feeling. I love it even more when I get my first session come back healed and it's just so even and all my dots are there. And it's like, yes.
And they're all there and they're all evenly spaced and it's,
Yeah.
I
It's
don't
magic.
it's magic. It is. I loved it. After all this time that you still feel that way. Because that's something definitely. I say that everyone's like, I have this conversation quite often with people because I'm like, not everybody enjoys their work, right? But I'm really happy when I go to work and I'm really enthusiastic as you are and as you can tell in this conversation. But I love nothing more than getting a bald head with great skin. And then second to that is a awesome healed result. I almost do a little dance when they come in. I'm just over the moon. I'm just so excited.
My clients have seen me dance. Don't worry.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I think
I do my happy dance.
That's what separates it, isn't it? It's that enjoyment. I think if you don't enjoy it, you're probably going to try and find heaps of money real quick to try and fulfill that enjoyment.
Yeah. So that's certainly not what it's about at all. We really genuinely enjoy helping people overcome their hair loss issues and building some more confidence for the client. That's definitely where your heart needs to be if you're going to be doing scalp micropigmentation.
Yeah. It's so crazy because when I talk to you now, when I started and when you're starting anything, let's say you want to get rich. You see an ad pops up and it's like crypto trading, make $1 million in 30 days or something like that. You click and you want to do it. And when I talk to yourself, I'm like, all right, I just got to find the one thing that Caitlin does that's the difference, and then I can get that one thing and then I can be Caitlin. But what I realized after talking to yourself and what I realized after talking to many great artists that love what they do, it's always the same thing. Is that you enjoy what you do and you're always trying to just make the best result for the client. And as we've seen, you just keep on challenging yourself and that becomes the game. It's not that there's no jumping to some point of a super fast car and doing fast SMP.
No, there's no fast way, but I feel like if your intentions are there to do great work, that's, I think, what makes your business successful. Like, it has to be your intentions and your ability to continue to learn and grow, because I still learn and grow. I love going to the conferences. You can never stop learning. That's a bit cliche, but it's true. And it might be these little conversations that you have with other artists at these conferences are where you learn the most, not necessarily from the presenter on stage, but the conversations that you have behind the scenes with and networking with other SMP artists and working out that you do have the same struggles or you do have, the same passion in an area. That's where you can learn the most, and learning and continuing to learn and not knowing it all. You can never know it all. So I feel like that's a really good perspective and mindset to have.
Yeah, definitely. Absence of ego. I think you've really got to put that aside to become better. So what does SMP Australia have set up for 2024? Yeah, we're moving into 2024. Are you excited? Your first day back at work, is it?
I know, first day back at work. I haven't actually done my goals for this year, so I can't tell you. But
do you do that every year? The goal setting?
A little bit. Like we have our focus. So what do we want to do? So last year we had a bit of a push on doing some advanced modules. So I feel like Australia SMP artists are at a certain level at the moment with some base training that's being provided, but to take the training in Australia to a next level is really important. And that's what our goal was last year, is to create a whole lot of content. And so we've got some training programs about to launch for all advanced modules. So they will be coming out because we really want to take the SMP in Australia to another level. We want to bring it up to where it is overseas, because I feel like certain pockets are there, but there's a lot of people that's still not there and they need some help. And to be able to give that help is amazing. So we've got some advanced training modules coming out, and maybe some new locations as well.
Hey, that's so exciting. I think you're the perfect person to be leading up that advanced modules, and I love that this isn't something where you're thinking, I'm just going to get all the locations and get all the business. Your focus and your attention is to how can I make better artists in Australia.
Yeah.
I
But
love that.
but also looking after the girls that are in our team as well. Like, we don't want to step on anyone's toes, and we don't want to take work away from those girls either, because as we were saying before, like, there's only so many clients that are ready to proceed with SMP, and you can't flood the market. And, we haven't taken on a new location since COVID because, we're still sort of watching what the market's doing. And, you can't just open all these locations and not set them up for success. If we're going to do that, it has to be successful. Otherwise, I feel like I've let that person down.
100%. How did you find things through COVID?
Well, we were pretty lucky in Adelaide. We only had to stop for 4 months. And during that time, I really worked on the business. So I just took that massive opportunity of not physically doing scalp micropigmentation. So we did a whole lot of rebranding, and we just overhauled the whole business in that time. Like, we worked so hard behind the scenes. I did so many YouTube interviews with my favorite friends from around the world that do SMP. And so we just did, we smashed it with the 5-minute fast facts. We've got 40 YouTube clips on SMP in our YouTube channel. So we just really worked on the business, and that kept us going, because I think I would have gone insane otherwise. As much as I am ready for retirement, because I absolutely love not working and staying in my pajamas all day, we just took that massive opportunity to work on the business, which, as you know, as an SMP artist, like, working on the business and in the business is completely different.
100%. And and your business isn't you doing SMP every single day. Your business is so many different hats. I've said this before on a podcast, is that you're the salesperson, you're the content creator, you're the admin, you're the, you're the finance advisor. You do all of that, and that has to be outside of the time of you doing the SMP treatment. And also, when you're doing the SMP treatment, it can't be distracting the treatment.
Yeah, I'm super lucky that I have my husband that works in our business. So he's been with us for 5 years. And so he was lucky enough to be able to quit his job and work full-time in the business that helps run all of these locations, because I certainly couldn't do it without him. And we wouldn't be where we are, and our customer relations wouldn't be where they are without him either.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think on some level with SMP, your partner definitely does have to be involved, because it does take up a lot of your life, and maybe they wouldn't understand the obsession if they weren't in it and saw it. Does that make sense? You really, to make it work, or even you have to explain to your partner what this is, and how you are passionate about it, and how much time this is going to take up, and that's one thing I'd say, is that one of the things that's kept me going, that's helped out a lot, is something that you said before, is going to these events. I've only been to the one, but I'm going to the Meeting of the Minds this year, and I'm so excited. And being around other people who have the same passion and same excitement as you, it really fills your tank up. And you realize it's not just you, because if you talk to your mate, they don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. Oh no, like, I've just had the best times when I'd go to these conferences. Like, as much as I don't like traveling on my own, like, I think I've made that quite clear. But I do love when I get there because you all have the same love. And so it doesn't matter who you stand next to or sit with, you've all got something in common that you can just talk endlessly about. And yeah, these conferences are just the best.
God, it's so much fun. It's probably one of the most, outside of a great healed first session, I gotta say, like, hanging out with other SMP artists is probably the best. And it is because also I think why that is too is because SMP can be such a lonely pursuit because it's you and a client. And obviously you enjoy your client's company, but you're also focused on SMP, but it can be super lonely. You don't like it's just me in this room. It's just me tattooing every single day. And I think being able to, that's what I'd say is network, reach out, talk. I see sometimes some SMP artists online might get a little bit narky and maybe they drop a comment, maybe they say something. And I think if you just came and hung out, like you'd understand, like, because it's the idea that someone's a prick, but really when you meet someone, they're normally really nice people. And I remember the first time I met you, I was like, the first thing I said to you, I was like, oh, you're the nicest person. Like, because it was, Caitlin from SMP and these were all hypothetical people. And I'm like, oh my God, they're all just really nice people.
Yeah,
and it's
100%.
fun.
Yeah. And like, I think until you actually meet someone in real life, like, social media will perceive someone a certain way depending on what content they put out. But when you meet them in real life, it might be completely different. And, I've really shied away from social media in the last couple of years because I'm so judgmental of myself and I really have to get over that, and just get more content out there for my clients and not worry about what other people think of me. But, some people don't really know how I am because I don't put a lot of content out there in recent years because of that fear of being judged by other people.
It's a huge hurdle. I've struggled with this too, and it was lucky enough that I'd had a personal training background where I talked to the camera and stuff like that. But this day and age, we actually can't get away from it. Is that our marketing's on Instagram, Facebook, everything's online. So we have to put our face out there, and it can be hard not to act once the camera gets on. But what you said before is like the difference between in-person social media and real life is this is what I try and do is that I don't judge anybody on their Instagrams, on their social medias. I judge them when I meet the person, and I judge them how they treat me in that interaction. And I think that's important because also as well, what I'd probably say is if you see someone and you do feel that way a little bit and you're a little bit upset with Caitlin or someone else that you see online, it is a good self-reflection moment because Caitlin's doing really well. And sometimes that can make you feel insecure because you're not doing well. But the flip side of that coin is it like I did, if you talk to Caitlin or someone who has achieved what you've achieved, you know what? 9 times out of 10, what I've found is that they talk back and they're willing to help. Like every question I asked you, you were just like, yep. I'm like, oh, she's just giving me all the answers. I was like so amazed.
And taking it back to what you said previously about training, like I don't think students realize how hard we had it. And we're just giving you like the best of the best information. And I think some people don't appreciate it. They're like, oh yeah, I know that. Oh yeah, I know that. I'm like, you don't realize how much it took to find out that information and I think that's why I'm so passionate about my training is because I've done so much of the hard yards to then just give you the gold.
Yeah, you literally, thank you. Like you've gone through, I didn't do training with you. I wish that I did. But you've gone through the trenches. You've gone through like your story. We didn't even get through your whole story, but just the beginning there, like if you're an artist starting out now, God, you got it so good. If you're starting out right now and you go for training with SMP Australia, like I don't know if you do that in your training, but maybe like being like, hey, look, this is how I started and this is what you guys have now. but yeah, you literally have. You've paved the way, and that leads into my next question. Of I seen online there's some sort of like international quality control sort of summit or something like that, and I saw your face get posted up. Is that based around what you're trying to do with this advanced training and trying to bring up the quality in Australia?
Yes, that's completely separate. So the Crown International, it's called, which is and it's going to be like a governing body for the scalp micropigmentation industry. So we're going to set some really high standards of what we expect from any member of the guild. And that is in terms of like code of conduct, how you conduct yourself with clients, how you conduct yourself with other artists, ethics, how you have ethics with your clients as well as other artists in our industry, and continuing to learn and abiding by all of these codes will just rise our industry up higher as in terms of quality, infection control, how people conduct themselves in the business as well. So the guild or the Crown International it's a much needed organisation, which we tried back in 2017 and didn't really get anywhere, unfortunately. But raising the standards now when there's a lot more SMP artists around, I feel like it's something that's super important.
Yeah, and I guess there's never a fix, is there? Because in all industries, we have some version of this where there's just terrible, you get someone to come build a fence, it falls over type situation.
Yeah.
But like, I guess that you are avidly trying to do this and trying to help it. What do you think, like, if you could have a perfect world, do you think something like an apprenticeship style implementation for Australia, would that be an approach? I know that it's not something we could do, but if we could push to strive towards something, do you think that version, or just more what you're doing, just very in depth and just staying in contact with those students?
I feel like if the person was willing to be an apprentice, they would become a better artist.
Oh, I agree so much.
The problem is that everyone wants to be owning their own business. And you see it in the tattoo world all the time. They do, less than 12 months of an apprenticeship, and then they go start their own Instagram page and work out of another studio and rent a bed there, and they're their own business and entity. They just leave the people that give them the opportunity to do that apprenticeship. I'm super lucky that in my own business I found the best two apprentices. Like,
oh, you are so lucky. It's crazy how that happens.
Emma and Sam, work with me here in Adelaide. So there's 3 of us here in Adelaide. And, you've just got to find the right person who I guess doesn't want to own a business, perhaps, that wants to work in a team environment. They make fantastic apprentices, and in turn have now made amazing artists. So, I can see the difference between my students who are looking to open their own businesses versus someone who doesn't want to own their own business and is happy to do an apprenticeship. You do see the difference in confidence. Emma and Sam are super confident. They've done so many treatments now because working within our business, we've got scope for that. But students that come through, they do need to have a little bit more independence and self-confidence as well, because they don't have me to then say, okay, can you just pop in here and just double check this hairline? They have to back themselves a lot more. And so we have this talk with every student that comes through that, there's 2 different very sides of, the opportunities that are available. And, where do you feel like you fit in? Do you want to do a 5-day course, or do you want to do an apprenticeship? Because they're both super different.
Yeah, they are so different. I think too, sometimes it's almost like you need to create a situation to let somebody try and start their own business first and experience it. Because it's funny that that story lines up with when I first started. So when I first started, I actually called around to a number of different places to see if I could work for them. I was like, because I took the jump way too early. I was a barber and like I got a couple of treatments booked in and I just went, all right, quit the barbershop, walked in, and then I eventually had to sell my car to keep my business afloat. But at that point, like when you mention community, when you mention, working for someone, like at that point, I was like, yes, that is exactly what I want. And I don't think there's a lot of opportunity for that in Australia, but I think maybe that might be one of the outs to how the quality keeps going is that if more people employ more people and as everybody grows, that might be more of, and then the apprenticeship thing might be a bit more normal. But
Yeah.
the idea of community within SMP excites me so much. It's one of the things that I feel like I'm getting up and working towards now is just to have one other person. Like, 'cause your life is like my dream. Like you have like is it 3 or 4 artists you have?
In Adelaide, there's 3 of us. So Emma, Sam, myself.
And then you've got, Brisbane,
And then
Sydney,
Daniel. And then, we've got Brisbane, 2 in Sydney and 1 in Geelong.
Oh, wow. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Am I 8? Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That sounds like the most fun.
It is fun, and like you said, like the girls, like Maria from Sydney, for example, Clara, she did try for some time. She was a student of mine, and she did try for some time, to create and build her own business. And then when I said, again, because I love helping people, I'm like, look, if I've got some clients, would you be willing to come on board and work as an SMP Australia, person? So, and that it's just worked really well with Marie because she did try it and make it on her own, and she found it very difficult. And working through us, she's managed to have enough clientele. And so that's just worked perfectly. So like you said, those almost need to try doing it on their own, realise how hard it can be, and then switched over to, the opportunity that we gave them.
Yeah, it's like a try it before you buy it situation. I also give that advice to people with SMP. Like I'll say, hey, like come on down and try and, use a machine. See if you could sit here for a couple of hours trying to perfect a dot. And like, because really, if that's dead boring, then you're not going to have much fun.
Yeah.
You're not going to have
a lot of what the work is.
That's every day. But it's trying a business and seeing how that goes. But yeah, the idea of all you girls working together and obviously with your partners, just for me, that's a dream. And you must be so proud as well. Like you've got so many students that are doing great work. Plus you've got your own people within SMP Australia doing great work because like it's hard to do good work and the satisfaction of that. Is that something that Caitlin sits back and goes, wow, for in moments?
Yeah, for sure. Like when I see my girls pop up some of their work on social media, like you are really proud that they're representing us. Like Anita in Brisbane, like her work is amazing. And, she works on some of the toughest skins up there with sun damage and sweating and humidity. And for her to be creating amazing results, like I'm so proud. And then, on the flip side, going to these conferences where every one of my team members were in the finals for the Team Micro Awards.
Yes.
That was really cool.
Wow.
It's almost like, the girls are doing a great job. Like I'm not being biased.
Yeah.
But then also seeing, Hayden from New Zealand, Feather Touch, like he's one of my students and he managed to get a silver. Like that just shows like, I feel like I'm doing a great job in the training as well because that's showing. And Emma, the girl that works for us here, managed to bring home the gold in that category. So like that was so exciting for me at the conference this year that the students are doing so well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Hayden was at the master's class with Tony last year as well. His work is looking unbelievable. It's so good. And he's such a nice guy. And when I talk to him about you, he has nothing but nice things to say. I can imagine the level of fulfillment that you must feel for that would be like for me, when I think about goals in a sense of SMP, like that feeling that you're just explaining now, I feel like that's it. Like that's something to really strive for.
Yeah, for sure. And Hayden's really lucky. He has, a beautiful wife, Cherie, who's an amazing permanent makeup artist. So, and that's where that little bit of support comes in, that you've got a supportive partner in what you're doing, and not only in support in, you can do it, honey. Like it's also support in that I just, I've got this really difficult skin. Can you just pop in and, what do you think? Or you've just got someone to workshop something with, someone with. It's super helpful to have a supportive partner in that area as well. And we do train a lot of the partners of permanent makeup artists, and I feel like they do really quite well, because it's almost like they can see how well their partner's doing. So, the SMP side could be their little part to the business, and they feel like they make a really good contribution there.
That's an awesome little partnership. Yeah, you do. Your partner definitely has to have some part to play, or some understanding of the SMP world, because it's so foreign, and support is a big one. If they don't support this little obsession that seems mental, then it's going to be hard, because it's going to be hard from the get-go, let alone not having that support there as well.
Because you do have to work really hard, and so the partner has to understand that.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. How hard it's going to be. Is that I think, I think what I first started out doing is I would set myself, Monday, even if I didn't have clients, I would do Monday to Friday, and I would just clock in, clock out. I'm like, whether I had a practice mat or a phone call or I'd do a post, I would go into the studio that I first trained out of, and even when I wasn't renting a bed, and just watched artists work. I watched artists work. I did, and that's 3 years ago now. I think I'm only at the point where I'm full time now. And I think that I did it fast for two reasons. Is that one, I spent way too much money, and I had my parents' house to fall back on, plus luckily some savings. But if you're starting out with SMP right now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 4 years would be probably a pretty good place to go. Hey, all right, in 4 years' time, with enough work, dedication each week, putting it a part-time thing to begin with, then going more of a full-time, part-time, then a little bit more part-time, and then it would turn into a career over maybe 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, you'd be about right, I'd say, because like with myself, I was lucky enough that I had the surgeon that I worked for. He supplemented me with more contracting for hair transplant, so I still had an income. But he also referred a lot of clients to me, because no one had heard of SMP. And so I found it super hard to get started, but I was just so lucky to have him backing me and sending me clients in a referral system. But, for people stepping into it now, like, you certainly can't just quit your day job and jump straight into it. It does take some time, and you have to learn so many parts of the business as well as just the SMP. And so depending on what kind of background you come from, like if you've come from a business background, you're going to excel in the marketing side perhaps. And so that works in your favor. But if you've had absolutely no background information in Instagram or Facebook, if you don't own those apps, or if you've had no marketing background, for Google ads or anything like that, then you're going to have to learn that whole side of things as well as the SMP side of things. So I think everyone has a very different journey depending on what background information they can bring.
And I think you don't have the choice to not learn those things. I think that those are the things that make the business work, and that's that. There is no not doing one and doing the other. You could have the best SMP in the world, but if you don't know how to market, social media, do phone calls, manage your finances, brand, do content, any of those things, you will not have anybody in the chair. And this is what I would say in regards to that, is that when I started, is that you have to, as much as Caitlin's gone and she knows everything there is to know about hair loss, which is so important. You also have to know about marketing. And that is somewhere. So when you're looking at your week, and sometimes students will message me and they're like, oh, I've got no clients in this week. I've got nothing to do. It's like, there is so many things that you could be doing. Like the treatment is one thing, one part of this. So what I would say, and I've said this before, is that learn marketing to the point, to at least a decent point. Get some form of sales training, perfect your art, and then put all those together. Also, as well, you got to do your tax and your zero, and you got to learn that as well. But learn those things until you don't have enough time to physically do them anymore. There's not enough time in the day. And because that's the point where I actually sold my car and nearly sunk myself, was I was trying to do my own marketing, own sales and treatments and content. And my morning was insanity. My days were crazy. I would go on, build out my ads, then I would film content, then I'd go in and do the treatment, and my treatment started to lack. And then my booking stopped, and I'd got to this point in marketing where I couldn't figure out how to change, because the algorithms change. And then I went through 2 marketing companies. Neither of them worked. And then I found Levi. And finally, I sold my car and I gave money to him. And I said, bro, this has to work. I don't have otherwise, this is it. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to pay rent next week. And then it ended up working out. But only to me learning marketing to a degree, I was able to see quicker that these guys didn't know what they were doing in the marketing space when I put them on.
100%. Yeah, you have to know something about your marketing so that you know when things are not working and it's time to perhaps look at a different company. Like, you get to a point in SMP where as soon as you start to get busy with something, whatever you don't enjoy the most, or you find difficult, or you're not an expert, that's when you can start to delegate. And marketing's a really important one to let go of early on if possible, because if you can pay for some marketing, that's just going to keep people coming through and you can manage the rest yourself. You can do book work at night time, or hire an accountant once a year to do taxes and things like that. But marketing is so important, and unfortunately, you have to spend money on marketing.
Yeah, and it's a lot more than you realize.
Correct.
It's I remember this conversation always sits in my mind. When I first started out my first year, I was sitting there with a student who was feeling very unmotivated and almost bewildered and just overwhelmed by the idea of starting an SMP business. And she was sitting there and she said, can you show me how to do ads on our phone? I said, look, you can only do something basic on your phone, but I'll show you. And I put together a real basic ad for her. And then I said, oh, you just put how much in there? And she said, oh, I thought it was free. I said, no, you have to pay for it. And she said, well, how much should I put on? I said, the minimum I'd put is at least $100 a week, which is absolutely nothing, by the way. And she goes, $100 a week? I'm not spending that much. And
wow.
Yes. So, and it's a lot. You spend a lot of money on marketing, but this is the thing. This is how you get work, and that's it. And if you don't like it, then you do need to find something else to do, because there's no other way.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is one part where students don't realize sometimes, when they're ringing around finding out who maybe they're going to do some training with, to learn the skill is one thing, but you have to have a marketing budget if you want to start getting clients and get busy, because you can only do so many friends. There's only so many friends or maybe clients within your business that you can work through. And once they're gone, you need to be able to continue to find new leads. And unfortunately, marketing and spending money on ads, whether that's in Instagram or Facebook or Google ads, you have to spend money, unfortunately, if you're in it for the long term.
You have to, and do your research for the company, and do your research on marketing, because sometimes it can be just putting your money on the table like you're at a casino. You don't know what's going to come back. It can be a little bit of a gamble. And also as well, there's the sales side of things. And you said before, once you get busy enough, you subcontract out that work. pick what you're good at. If you're amazing at marketing, but your phone calls are terrible and you hate doing them, you could get someone to do your phone calls for you. So you subcontract out the things that you're not good at.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, Caitlin, this has been a fantastic chat. I've taken so much out of it. I've taken so much out of it that I think I'll rewatch it myself to get these little nuggets. You're a wealth of information, and I love the passion, the enthusiasm that you still have, because I always say to people, you know, the day that the passion and drops out for this for me is that the day that I'll quit. But 9 years time, you're still passionate, you're still loving what you do. It makes me want to do better as well within this industry. It's you're definitely a light to strive for. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. And thanks for all the kind things you've said as well, Nathan. It's lovely to hear that.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thank you.